training session. We want to make sure that we pay our gratitude towards Dr. Ulrich for being here. This is his third session that he has done for our conference. He is the creator of this test that is so widely used in our profession. It's kind of a very much a foundation of how I work with my students. And we value his input and his knowledge and expertise that he shares with us. And we just want to make sure that we thank him from the bottom of our hearts for joining us so much this conference. So thank you.
Okay, as was pointed out, this is the third time I've done this in the last 3 days, which is fine. I'm honored to be here for a couple of reasons. One, I've come here 17 times. This is my 17th time I've been here to present. Can anybody guess what the first year was? No, you can't. 1982. Somebody guessed 1970 the other day. But I'm honored to be here because every time I come here, I learn something from you. I learn something from the types of questions you ask. I learn something by the feedback you give me. And every time I revise this test, I guarantee that some of your comments I use to make the modifications. For example, from the TGMD2 to now the TGMD3, I reinserted the skip. Well, the last time I was here, I got feedback. There was a group that was threatening to take me out back of the board. They said, you need to reinsert the skip. The rationale, which I never conceived of, was there were too many kids with ASD that were just missing out on eligibility because the skip is no longer there. Well, that tells me the skip is a tough skill, and they usually get many zeros. That's a smart rationale, and I listen to people's smart rationale. And so I reinserted it. And so over the next 15 years, we'll see whether that was a good decision, but I think it is. Another reason I'm honored to be here is this, in my career, I've presented hundreds and hundreds of times. Would you believe this is the first ticketed event? They're giving out tickets, free of charge. Okay, our task today is to give you a good workshop training on the TGMD3 and answer your question. Before I move on, I want you to be aware of the webpage. There's a lot of useful information on the webpage, especially as it relates to sample administration. You will see me demonstrating all the skills as though I'm demonstrating to a child. So feel free to use it. You'll see how I demonstrate. Doesn't mean that I'm a perfect demonstrator, but I guarantee I'm a perfect demonstrator in terms of demonstrating each skill, which includes all the performance objectives, all the performance criteria. You've got to learn how to demonstrate these skills because you've got to do that as part of the standardized procedures. You can use a video to do that. You can use another really strong student that is very skilled in locomotion and object control are all skills. You can do that, but it has to be a good demonstration as part of the standardized procedure. So feel free to use the information that's on here. The outline for today certainly is, I will quickly go over because we only have 90 minutes or actually 87 minutes left. Is certainly there is a taxonomy of movement behavior, and we're centered on fundamental motor skills. They influence specialized movement skills such as playing soccer and games and softball, and baseball, and all other kinds of specialized skills, but also lifetime recreation functional skills. If a child, I don't care who it is, any child, who does not master many, emphasis on many, of the fundamental motor behaviors is going to be challenged tremendously to move up to these. And so they hit a barrier. They become less active. They socialize less. They gain weight more because they become more sedentary. And so this is the heart of where we should be instructing for children with special education needs and the typical preschool elementary age child. Okay, I've covered most of this. Building blocks critical to healthy development. There's a host of research over the last decade that clearly demonstrates the value of fundamental motor skills in terms of health and functioning. Now, the one thing I will point out to you, one of my bigger disappointments for the TGMD3 and the norms. I'm hopeful every time I revise it, it's like new norms, do all the psychometric property studies, that finally girls will catch up to boys in ball skills. Now, there's a lot of skilled girls, but the majority of them are significantly inferior in competency in ball skills. And the research in public health and kinesiology demonstrates that any child who has better ball skills is going to be more physically active today, in the future, and as an adult. So ball skills, we're leaving the girls behind. We've got to develop more social ways to increase competency in ball skills for girls. They like socialization, and that's just natural. So we've got to do a much better job. And so, again, unfortunately, I'm disappointed because no one would suggest there's a significant difference between boys and girls in ball skills. And it shouldn't be. Biologically, there's no reason for that. Implications for future physical activity, again, with the girls, but also we've done a number of studies that demonstrate that kids with ASD who have better ball skill competency and fundamental motor skill competency do better over time when they're enrolled in those social and communication interventions that's at the heart of their instruction. They make more gains. That makes logical sense. If I have better competency, people are going to ask me to play with them at recess, and they're going to socially interact with me. I firmly believe there's strong enough data to suggest in an ASD curriculum, we've got to have a strong fundamental motor skill curriculum, because it will benefit them, both in fundamental motor skills and physical activity, but also in social and communication development, which is your major weaknesses. And certainly everybody here knows the value of assessment is required for really claiming that you have quality instruction. You have to do some form of assessment. You're going to individualize. To individualize, you've got to know in general, and very specifically if you can, where the child is currently functioning on a skill or skills. So you've got to do assessment. And hopefully, when I was your age and just coming out of school, boy, there wasn't much available. There's more available today than there was 30 years ago, 40 years ago. But most of what was available previously, you needed a PhD in psychology to be able to administer in school. And they did not have good content ability. They had one or two skills in motor area and claimed that they were delaying in motor knowledge. Excuse me? They were delaying those one or two skills, but how can you make that claim? So again, we have better assessments today. There is no such thing as a perfect assessment. That also includes the TGMD3, 2 and 1. It does not meet everybody's needs. If I'm working with a profoundly impaired child, well, I'll tell you, I'm not using the TGMD. If I do, it's as a checklist. There's nothing out there much for that type of population. You can't get publishers publishing because there's not enough of those children to go around and sell their products to. And so it's not perfect for that group. We've done a host of studies. Many people have done a host of studies. Anytime you start using it with a different population, you've got to do psychometric studies to make sure it's valid and reliable for that type of child. We've done a lot of those. There's a need for those of you that are in the master's program to do another study with another population. Replicate. One study does not mean it's true. 2 or 3, come with time. Okay, so replicate this. And certainly the transactional relationship between motor skills and physical activity, they both influence each other. Okay, so as I usually start off with the TGMD, it's a measure of fundamental motor behaviors. If I had to do one thing over again, I would have changed the name to the fundamental motor behavior rather than skills. We're looking at the quality of movement, that's behavior. But when I developed this first edition of part of my dissertation, we didn't know that. And so motor skills is where everybody was focused on. So, okay, I call it test of gross motor development. It is developmental. Don't expect 3-year-olds to be able to master everything. They master some components, but not others. It's developmental. They get better with experience, which comes with age and practice. It is for children 3 to 10 years of age, 10 years, 11 months. That's what it was standardized on. I get the most frequent question, and I've gotten that here 5 or 6 times. Can I use it for 11 or 12-year-old? They are not included in the norm. So if you do, it's no longer considered a standardized measure. Okay? You can use it for a 12-year-old. Calculate the ball scores for the ball skills and the locomotor skills and the total, go into the norms. Take that score, go across the row labeled 50th percentile. That's the average score, 50th percentile, until you find that child's score. Let's say it's 24. Go up and look at what age that's the average for. That score 24 is the average score for a 5-year-old child. So now that 12-year-old is performing like the average 5-year-old. You can use that information, but always approach it as an alternative assessment because it is not standardized for them. Now, maybe there's a need. I thought about it, increasing it by another year or 2. But again, the changes are challenging to make. Direct observation. You've got to set up the task conditions that are on your score sheet for each item. Certain distance for running, certain distance for hopping, certain distance for galloping, certain distance from a wall to throw at, to kick at. Follow the directions. Then you will give the child one practice trial. That practice trial is for one purpose, so that you are confident as a tester, they understand the task. Not that they can perform it well, but that they understand the task. For example, we've all experienced this. We've used assessment before. We're testing the child's ability to skip. I do a great skip. Okay, it's your turn. Now show me how you skip. And they start off doubting. They didn't understand the task. Now, they may not be able to do it, but they did not understand the task. And so I'm going to demonstrate again. Once I demonstrate again, then it's time to give them their test trials. Okay? But that's what the practice trial is for you to understand whether or not if they understand the task. And not all children are going to test to understand every task that you give them. Process, it is primarily a process assessment where you look at the pattern of movement. I have a couple of performance criteria that are product. Can they bounce the ball 4 consecutive times before they lose control? That's a product. Okay, they can do it 4 times. Or can they throw the ball and actually hit the wall? Or can they swing and hit the ball off a batting tee? They must be able to hit the ball. That's a product. But most of the performance criteria are process. They are patterns of behavior. It's reliable and valid. I'm very, very pleased. And I never lose sleep over this, in a sense, because there's been so many research studies done around the world, not just in the United States. There's at least a dozen countries translated this test that are now using it. And they always have to do psychometric properties. Just because it's reliable and valid in the United States doesn't mean it's valid and reliable in China. So they have to do all those studies, and guess what? The results they publish are very similar to ours, very similar. So I'm very confident, and that's why the publisher took it over. If a publisher does not publish a test, it's because they haven't done their job in evaluating psychometrics, or they did and it's poor. Go Don't assume that a test is valid or reliable without looking at the data and it's published in peer-reviewed journals that suggest it is valid and reliable. When you use it with a different population, as we've done with ASD, we published a paper using pictures. In other words, it's supplemental information for the child with ASD. It's reliable and valid. Great. You can use pictures to get them to perform better, get your true performance. So I'm very comfortable with all of that. And it is norm referenced. Yes, it's criteria reference. I'll address that in a moment, but it's primarily norm reference. It comes with national norms. You cannot make an eligibility decision without a standardized norm reference test. You also need supplemental information. You can observe them on the playground. How did they do on the playground? How did they do in gym class? And you can use that also to supplement your information for eligibility decisions on IEP committees. Criteria reference, if you look at the score sheet you have, the completed score sheet, and you see a series of 1s and 0s. If I'm looking at what skill to work on with TJ, I'm going to look at the skills that have mostly 0s. He doesn't have any competency in that skill, so I'm going to work on that. Now, within that skill, what performance criteria do I start working on? Well, whichever one has a 0. So it can be used as a criteria reference measure for instructional programming. It's used as an eligibility test. And I know everybody in here that you use it for that. I know that. You told me that. And so you need norms to be able to make an eligibility decision. Secondly, to plan instruction, which I just addressed, look at the score sheet. Where does a child have 0s? Use that information to decide what you're going to work on that skill. Or within the all skill subtest, what skill are you going to work on? Look where they have a lot of 0s. So you can plan instruction on gross motor skills based on their score sheet and where the 0s are at. Assess individual progress. The one thing over the 17 times I've presented here that's changed is that we are being held more accountable for our services. As a taxpayer, I like that. I hold myself accountable. I will hold myself accountable to you today to do a good job. Okay? I look at your faces. Are you smiling? I use that feedback. I use all your questions as feedback. But look, you test the child one time, you do a series of instruction over time, you decide the amount of time. 8 weeks, 10 weeks, 15 weeks, whatever. We test the child. How many performance criteria has this child achieved in that time? 8. That's a level of progress. They've achieved 8 performance criteria out of the total number that they could achieve, whatever that is. So that's individual child progress. The next one is evaluating the success of your total gross motor program or your physical education class. You will look at a variety of children that you teach, that you've tested. Test them twice, and then average the amount of progress. That tells someone, like the principal that keeps changing every other year, how successful your program is. That on average, you get children, and you may do this by disability group. I don't know, I'm not going to suggest how you do this, but you're smart enough and creative enough to do it the best way. You may do it with kids with ASD that I'm working with. The average is they make 8 or 9 or 10 performance criteria gains over X number of weeks. Okay, I also work with kids with Down syndrome, which have intellectual disabilities. What is their average progress? And so you can do it by disability, or you can do it generally as your class, in general. You have a mixture of kids in your classes. So there's nothing wrong with doing it that way as well. Just do it. And keep that data the next time you've got to argue for the success of your program and the need for more supplies. Let's see. Serve as a measurement instrument for research. When I first did this, it was just like, I was just like any master's degree student that just graduated and was going on for a doctoral degree. I had no idea about research. I had no desire for research. I didn't know what research was. I knew how to spell it. Guess how many times the TGMD has been cited in research studies since the first publication? Over 5,000 times. So it's being used. I use that data to convince me it is a valid measure for research, and it's useful. I get embarrassed sometimes, a little bit. I don't get embarrassed easy, but I do sometimes when I'm at a research conference like this, and people are presenting 6 papers, and 4 of them cite me. I almost... Yes, I'm pleased, it's very useful. Very useful, but I never conceived of that when it was being developed. And then lastly, which I have totally no control over, there are countries, which I will point out in a moment, that use it to identify high performing, the top 3 or 4% of children at, say, 5 years of age, 6 years of age. And then they recruit them into their sports training skill programs, give good nutrition, good training, expecting that if they do that for quite a few years, there's a higher probability that they may eventually become good Olympic athletes. This is being done in Russia. Okay? Russia is doing this. I don't know of other countries, they may be. This is something that was done 40 years ago. And so they're repeating that. I can't control that, but I can provide them with a good measure to hopefully make valid decisions. Okay, we see that we have 2 subtests. I want to only point out here that I've changed the name of the object control skills, the all skills. I train many, many people, not just adapted, not just regular PE teachers. I train people in public health. They have no idea what object control skills are. And then you look at it and say, why the heck did I ever call it object control skills? There's no answer. And so I decided finally to change it. You can only change things when you revise, and so I changed it to all skills. Yes, run, gallop, skip, hop, horizontal, jump, and slide. I eliminated the leap. I inserted the skip. I included, I have the 2-hand strike, which has been on all versions. I have the 1-hand strike. And the 1-hand strike, when you drop the ball and strike one-handed, I put that in for a couple of reasons. One is a very functional skill that leads to a variety of specialized sports like tennis. I play a lot of singles and mixed doubles tennis. So of course, if I'm going to add one, it's going to be 4-hand tennis type of stroke. But also, there's a lot of countries using this in Asia. 2-hand strike is not culturally normative for them, but 1-hand strike is. And they become very good in tennis, thanks to Lena over her career. And so 1-hand strike is on there. Kick, catch, dribble, overhand, throw, underhand, roll, I deleted for one reason. I test a lot of kids, and I happen to see when I'm testing 3-year-olds, I'm going to do a good demonstration of an underhand roll. They come up, what do? They drop down to their knees. Well, they can't do half of the performance criteria on their knees. So I decided, maybe I should do it and use a more functional skill that does lead to more specialized skills such as overhand, the underhand throw. So that was the reason for the change. Hopefully that works out. Give a good demonstration. You must be a good demonstrator. Some of you are shaking your head, yes, but I guarantee I've seen lots of teachers demonstrating and forgetting to use proper arm movements. So really concentrate on your arm movements. Now I also realize by the time you do this, you're dead tired. You're not really focused because you're dead tired. But keep in mind that performance criteria have to be reflected on your demonstration. Use a video if you're really tired, and you can. I train a lot of public health people that use this for health research. They can't demonstrate. And the first time I did this, it was over a 2-hour period of a workshop. How much time do you think in 2 hours I had to spend unknowingly until I started teaching them how to demonstrate? About 90 minutes. They couldn't demonstrate. They're all females that are mid-career. They haven't thrown balls too often. They haven't done the motor skills. And so you really have to be a good demonstrator. Force yourself to be a good demonstrator. You give one practice trial. As I mentioned, the reason for the practice trial is for you to be confident the child understands the task. Doesn't mean they have to do it well, but they have to understand the task. And if they don't, then re-demonstrate. And then give 2 test trials and score each trial separately, independently. The performance scoring is very easy. It's if they perform the performance criteria on your test score, you'll see 0s and 1s. If you see a 1 there, they did it correctly on that trial. I had a question, I think it was in the first workshop on Thursday. What happens if they do it really well on the practice trial, but then they don't do it as well on the first test trial? Too bad. You score what you see on the test trials. Most likely you're still inconsistent. Okay? So it becomes a 0 if they don't do it correctly. Even though they did it correctly on the practice trial. That's not a scoring trial for you. Now the one thing I need to correct, and this happens often, and hopefully you trust my knowledge on this area. If you're watching a child, okay, I'm batting, let's assume I have a bat here, and I'm stepping in, I'm swinging, and you score it, but you miss one of the performance criteria. You still have to score it. What are you going to do? You didn't see it because it happened so quickly. Don't score it. Do another trial and just look for that performance criteria, because I guarantee 90% of the time, if you score it, your biases are going to come into play. It does for me, it does for everybody. They're not purposeful biases. But if it is a young-looking child, you're going to say, no, 0. He couldn't have it. And then he may have it. If it's a little girl, 0. Okay? You have your biases, but they're not purposeful. And so don't score it unless you know that you saw it. Give it one more test trial and only score that performance criteria. That makes sense? Good, because we want to get the child's true score as close as possible. Okay, let's go through the performance criteria. Now, I never advertise. Never do I advertise. I am today. I have every time I've done this workshop. I have a sore throat and a cough. Medicine balls, Starbucks. It makes a new man. It's excellent. Okay, now the run is an easy one to score in general. Arms move in opposition to legs, elbows bent. It doesn't say how much bent. They cannot be straight. You'll have kids, a lot of times, you see this frequently with kids with ASD. They'll have different arm movements. Okay, inappropriate. Okay, or look down here. No, there's no arm movement. It has to be 0. There has to be some flexion. And they should be moving forward in opposition to the weight-bearing foot. Some bend. Secondly, narrow foot placement, landing on heel or toes. That happens frequently. You can hear flat-footedness. You can hear it. In terms of narrow foot placement, generally, I only see this more frequently with kids with Down syndrome because of the postural control issues they have, balance. They might adjust and adapt because of their balance issues. One thing I've learned over my career working with kids with Down syndrome as much as I do, and the research bears this out, when they move, their goal, not yours, but their goal is to move safely. And now I know why I had such a hard time getting kids with Down syndrome to run. They didn't want to run. That felt unsafe to them. They would walk and walk fast. They won't run. Now again, some kids with Down syndrome run, of course. But no, the kids with Down syndrome, when they move, their goal, their internal goal is to move safely. They fall a lot. They fell a lot as youngsters. And so they might widen their base of support. Well, okay, that's too wide. It should be certainly closer together, within a foot, 12 inches or so, roughly. Repair where both feet are off the ground. We can see that. That's easy. I don't have to demonstrate that. And the last one, non-support leg bent about. Doesn't say 90 degrees. It says about 90 degrees. To make this easy for you, always, always, always concentrate on where the foot's at. If the foot is up here, you know they have it. You don't have to look at this angle. Look at the foot. If it's close to the bottom, close, you know they have it. This is much easier to see. Now, if you look at the directions for the run on your test score sheet there, it says you must tell them to run fast. If they do not run fast, they're not going to have this. And yet they may be able to do it. Tell them to run fast. Okay, I'm demonstrating, watch how fast I run. Now it's your turn. I want to see how fast you can run. Show me how fast you can run. That only occurs when they're running faster. So use that foot as your good gauge. It's much more objective. Okay, gallop. Arms flex. Again, there's some flexion. There's not straight. It's not just one arm moving forward. It's both arms coming forward. Arms, plural. Flex and swinging forward. They're swinging forward. This is for force production. It's to carry their body. And both arms have to come forward. Secondly, again, this is my failure. Too many words. But this is the smallest statement I can make. I've tried different things. A step forward with the lead foot, followed by the trailing foot landing beside or a little behind the lead foot, not in front of. So, now I'm galloping. I'm going to gallop. Personally, leading with my left foot. So I'm going to step on that foot. This is my lead foot. And then I'm going to bring my trailing foot up adjacent to or behind. It can never cross in front of. So watch for this foot coming out in front. They have to control over that pendular action. Free pair where both feet are off the ground. Very easy to score. Very easy. Oh, I know I need to go back here. Maybe one more. The other thing we see a lot with their leg movements is young kids, typically developing preschoolers, usually hop like this. That's a hop. It's an immature hop, young development hop. They don't have any swing, and the foot is way out front. That's for balance purposes. That's an adaptation thing. They don't have enough balance yet on one foot to be moving forward, so they'll do that. Whenever you see this, they get a 0 for this component. First of all, they have no swing, and then secondly, the foot's way out in front. And then maintains a rhythmic pattern for 4 consecutive gallops. The distance, that's part of the protocol. It gives you a distance to put cones out and have them gallop from one cone to the next. They're going to get more than 4 gallops out. They get 7 or 8 maybe. They only have to produce a gallop 4 consecutive times. So they may mess up the first 2, but they get 4 consecutive ones out. They go 1. Secondly, and this is the one that I think a lot of people make a mistake with, and this is partly my fault. They do not have to have all the preceding components for this to be scored a 1. But it has to be a gallop. It can't be a hop, skip, or jump. It looks like a gallop. They may be going like this, for example. 1, 2, 3, 4. I can credit for this one. It's a 1. They did 4 consecutive, well, in that case it was a hop, I'm sorry. It was 4 consecutive hops. But they didn't have all the components. They don't need all the components to get credit for this. One performance criteria is not contingent upon a previous one. They have to do it 4 times on. You can tell me this is a hop. You know it's a hop. It's not a jump, it's not a throw, it's a hop. You would claim it's a hop, but you'd also tell me it's an immature, younger development hop. They get credit for 4 hops. But they're going to have 0s on some of the others. That makes sense? Okay. Okay, the hop, non-support leg swings forward in pendular fashion to produce force. Okay? The leg is swinging forward. You're coming forward for force production. Foot of non-support leg remains behind the hopping leg. So in other words, it's not way out here. Has to stay behind the trunk. Arms flexion, swing forward to produce force. Both arms should be driving the body forward. Not hopping, sorry. Okay, the arms are being used together to produce force, to drive them forward. And then hops 4 consecutive times on the preferred foot. 4 times on whatever foot they choose to use. Now, one of the reason I made the change from the TGMD2 and the 1, they used to have to do it on both sides of the body. I changed that because all the kids I test, I rarely ever see them change feet unless I tell them to. So why test it on both sides? You can if you want, but it's not part of the test. It's just using their preferred side. Can they do it well? And you score. That shortens the assessment a little bit. That's one of my priorities always, to make it more functional for you. It doesn't take as much time. But kids don't normally use both sides for hopping. They use the preferred side. Now, when I'm teaching them, I'm going to teach them on both sides. Okay, skipping, my favorite skill. Arms are flexed and move in opposition to legs. So now I'm skipping. Should be rhythmical. Again, a lot of times what we see, I think I pointed this out, is that if something's missing frequently in locomotor behaviors, it's the arm movements. So really concentrate on the arms. Step forward by hop, followed by hop. Very easy. They take one step and then hop, one step and then hop. Completes 4 consecutive rhythmical alternating skips. So now, I can mess up on the first 2, but if I get 4 consecutive out before they get to the cone, you give me credit for that. Always score what they do consistently. If they mess up on the trial, when you repeat like the locomotor, there's multiple repetitions over the distance. If they do it correctly the majority of the time, you give them credit for it, even though they may have messed up on 1 or 2 of those repetitions. Score consistency. Horizontal jump. Prior to takeoff, both knees are flexed and arms are extended behind the back. So, easy one is the score. There's some flexion. It doesn't say how much, but there is some bend in the knees. Arms are here before takeoff. Now, how many times have we seen kids that we laugh at internally? And then they eventually take off. Doesn't matter. It wastes time, but it doesn't matter. As long as before they take off, these arms are behind the trunk and the knees are flexed. Arms extend forcefully forward and upward, reaching above the head. Now, this is the one that many scorers make an error that causes measurement error. You will frequently score a 1 if you see any arm thrust. Even though it stops here, you're gonna, if you see arm thrust at any level, you're just gonna score 1, and then you're gonna pay attention to the other performance criteria. No, it has to reach full arm extension to the head or beyond for maximum force production. Don't give credit if it stops down here. The other thing is frequently we'll see this. I'll jump and I'm going to do this. 0. Okay? There's not enough, the quality of that work thrust is not helping them in any way. Plus, on the next performance criteria where they forcefully bring their arms down, they can't do it. So you get a 0 for the next one that we're going to talk about. So that circular moving automatically gets a 0. Even though it looks somewhat like extension, it's not functional at all. Both feet come off the floor together and land together. Easy to score. Easy to hear on the landing. Oh, I heard that. They didn't land together. So use your hearing to judge that last part. And then the arms are forced downward during landing. No matter how far, they can have a 0 for arm thrust that ends here. But when they land, they bring it down, they get a 1. Remember, one performance criteria is not contingent upon a previous one. If they have some arm thrust, although it's incomplete, they get a 0 for the incomplete arm thrust, but when they land, they do bring it down. They force their arms down. Sliding. Ideally on sliding, if you can have a line on the surface, it makes it a lot easier to score. Again, in the ideal world, we don't live in an ideal world, so, but it's much easier to score this if they're sliding across a line. Body is turned sideways, so shoulders remain aligned with a line on the floor, assuming there is such a thing. Everybody in here has a good imagination. That's part of our competency in adapting. Good imagination. You imagine all of it, okay? I'm sliding. I'm looking at my shoulders. Are my shoulders reasonably aligned? Now, can I have a little deviation? Yes, of course you can. But not a lot. If they get to a certain critical point, whatever that is, now their chest is pointing in that direction. It becomes a gallop. So, yes, they can have a little deviation, but not much. That's why it's always easier to reference their shoulders to that line. That makes sense? You do not tell them which direction to go. So in other words, I demonstrate, let's say the child is here. One of the things I should show you is the poly spots. Not part of the test, but boy, I'll tell you, it keeps it much more organized. I have a child I'm testing, or 2 children I'm testing, one getting one poly spot, one gets the other poly spot. They're there, and I know where they're at, hopefully. They watch my demonstration. Okay, now, it's your turn to do it, they do it, now back to your poly spot. You don't waste too much time in transition. And then keep them to a point where they're not in front of you for ball skills to get hurt. No, my point was, I'm going to demonstrate to them. I'm going to my right. They can go to their left, that's fine. But I'm going to my right. You do not have to have your arms up. I do it because that's the way I've learned and I've always done it this way. They can go like this, that's fine. I do it this way. Step, 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 step. Stop. Then come back again. The only time we evaluate the performance criteria is when they go up. Coming back is only that you can be confident they can do it in the opposite direction. They can slide. It looks like a slide, but you're not scoring all the performance criteria. Only time you score the performance criteria is on the initial way up. Stop. You've scored all the components except for the last one. Can they now come back and slide back? It looks like a slide. Okay, it looks like a slide. And they did it with, it wasn't a gallop. Does that make sense? I don't want to confuse you on that. Step sideways with the lead foot, followed by a slide with the trailing foot where both feet come off the surface. There has to be an airborne phase. Watch for that. They cannot go like this. This is a slide. Boy, their feet aren't coming off the ground. That's not a slide as defined in this test. They get a 0 for this component. 4 continuous slides to the preferred side, 4 continuous slides to the non-preferred side. Going up, I assume that's the preferred side. Always, always, always watch. They get up here, they stop, don't let them turn around and go back this way. They're still going to the right side. They're tricksters. They're smart. 2-hand strike, ball skill. Now, I want to point out the validity and reliability of this test is not determined by the sequence in which you test the skills. Test it in any sequence you want. One thing we all know, most children like ball skill better. So you use that as a reinforcement. Okay, you're going to do 2 locomotor skills, and then I'm going to allow you to strike the ball. Okay, you're going to get better performance out of those 2 locomotor skills, assuming they know they're going to be reinforced by being able to strike a ball. So do that. Or just go from one skill all the way through, it doesn't matter. Use it the way you feel comfortable that you get the best performance out of the job. 2-hand strike. Score the gripping, grasping of the bat first. Okay, I've done the demonstration for them. I hit my home run. I hand them the bat. They're going to grasp it in some way, score it before they even get to the batting tee or before they get to swing. This is the easiest one to score. You can see it now, so you don't have to concentrate when they take a swing. Score it. Question came up the other day. What about if they get like this? That's fine. Up here, no. A few inches apart, not a problem. Not a problem. They're still grasping it correctly. Preferred hand on top. Child's non-preferred hip shoulder faces straight ahead. So I've got my batting tee here. I've got my plastic ball. They position themselves. Where do they position themselves? They should be positioned like this. Now, if they're standing like this, that's not a problem. How many people in the World Series did we see getting millions of dollars that are positioned like this? Now, if they're positioned like this, no, of course not. Or if they're positioned like this, no. There can be some deviation. I'd like to see, if I'm teaching somebody, I'm probably going to put some footprints here to really teach them how to approach the ball and the batting team. Okay? So, my non-preferred side is facing, I'm telling them to hit the ball straight ahead. And I point straight ahead. Their non-preferred side should be pretty much positioned in that regard. Two-hand, go backwards. Steps with non-preferred foot. Okay, batting tees here, they're up here. They should be stepping, transferring the weight into the step. That's what we're looking for. Very easy to judge. Now, some children we're going to test are already positioned like this. There's no way they can take a step. If that's the case, look for whether they transfer their weight to that foot. That's fine. Probably that child's a little more skilled anyway. But you don't give them the credit for it. If they're already positioned like this, where they already stepped in their approach, they can't step anymore. Look for the weight transfer. They're here, they're transferring their weight. If they don't, they get a 0. Hip and shoulder rotate and knee rotate. What we're looking for is a backswing and a foreswing. Backswing, foreswing. That's what we're looking for. Think in those words. Backswing, foreswing. Hits the ball, sending it straight ahead. Hits the ball, sending it straight ahead. So they usually, how many kids do we see? They love this skill. They're not going to whack that guy. And what do? They usually swing this. If that's a test trial, they get a 0. That's just the way it is. They get a 0. Okay? Now this time, watch the ball. Swing and hit, the ball goes straight ahead. Yes, there can be some deviation, but it's definitely going in the straighter position rather than going up or down or missing it or doing this. Okay? Any of those get a 0. One-hand strike, new skill. I can't remember if I told you I play a lot of singles and mixed doubles, tennis. And if I'm going to add something, my career is ending. Do something you want to do. Now, the other reason is there's a lot of Asian countries using this test. Two-hand strike is not as culturally normative. One-hand strike is very culturally normative. So I added it. And I think it's very functional for most games and activities that kids engage in. Now, I had to work hard. I worked harder on this than any other skill modification. How do I deliver the ball? Do I toss it? I'm a good tosser. I guarantee half of you are not. That doesn't mean with practice you can do it. But this requires a good position of the ball. I'm not going to put it on the batting tee. So I settled on it after many pilot tests. My demonstration, drop. Use the word drop and strike, or drop and hit. Drop. Not this, that's a bounce. So when you're doing the demonstration, I'm going to say, watch me drop the ball and hit. Reach up, drop, and hit. Okay? But this is a skill that is very challenging if they bounce the ball, because they have very little control over it. Much better to perceive movement when it's not going so fast, and it's more controlled. I'll take the backswing. Again, the paddle, this is not the ideal paddle, but this is what we have today. I like the waffle paddles that are more circular. Okay, this size is good. This is okay. I'm going to accept the child's performance with this. I don't think it's any heavier. But again, they take a backswing. That's what we're looking for. Are they coming with a backswing on this one? As the ball is being dropped, are they doing the backswing? Secondly, steps with non-preferred foot. All ball skills, for the most part, require a step, except for catching. Okay, so now they're stepping as they're swinging. Again, if the foot is already out here, it doesn't happen often on this skill, rarely. But if it is, they still have to transfer that weight to that foot. Most of the time, they're going to step in some way. Paddle follows through toward non-preferred shoulder. So in other words, their backswing, step, I'm hit the ball, which is the next performance criteria, and then I'm following through. I'm not stopping right here. I'm following through towards this shoulder, towards the opposite shoulder. These are pretty easy to score. And then strikes the ball towards the wall. They're able to actually hit it with a racket, and it goes forward in some way. It doesn't go straight up, straight down, or they swing and miss. They get zeros otherwise. Make sense?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
So I see that dropping the ball is not one of the performance get all the skills, it's okay if you drop it, and they then perform the rest of the criteria.
Yeah.
Is it okay that you drop it?
Besides safety.
Yeah, oh, I understand. I haven't gotten that question. I haven't gotten that question before. Whether you can. Technically not. They've got to be able to put all this together. Okay? So that's why it becomes a more challenging skill. It's a more challenging skill. And when you look in the norms, you're going to see, just like in the TGMD2, we have the percentage of kids who achieved each performance criteria at what age. And I guarantee that one is probably going to be very low at 3, 4, 5 years of age. Well, it's a developmental test. Yeah. Yes, sir. That is correct. That is correct. Yeah. The question was that I have a follow-through with a one-hand strike, but not the two-hand strike. Again, I have to eliminate. One of the harder parts of developing this test is coming up with defensive and performance criteria, and not too many. The research we did, maximum of 4 performance criteria. We go beyond that, we become very unreliable. So we kept it 4. And that was one, probably originally was on the list, but we took it off. Yeah. There are some other skills that have other follow-throughs, but not the two-hand strike. Okay, dribble. First one, and there's a reason I positioned him in this posture, and I'll tell you in a moment. Contact ball with one hand at about waist high. Typically, most people will stand erect. And so this is not an issue. They will, is the ball coming up to about the waist? About the waist, the belt level. Okay? In this guy doing this, he's skilled at basketball. How many kids in inner city LA are already good basketball players at 3, 4, 5 years of age, and they will take a defensive position? They're already bent over like this. In that case, first of all, I know they're good. And secondly, I'm willing to give them credit if they're doing this. It's not coming up to the waist, but it can't. They're already bent way down here. So I give them credit for that, if they do it in that way. Again, most kids stand erect. Most kids in adaptive physical education stand erect. And I don't do this in a demonstration. I do it standing erect. And what I do to save time is I will demonstrate. Bounce the ball 4 times and then catch it. 1, 2, 3, 4, catch. Otherwise, they may continue to bounce it and they're wasting time. Put a little structure into it. Push his ball with fingertips. It's pretty easy to see. They're pushing it with their fingers. And they could be up here. They don't get credit for the first one, but they're pushing it. They're not slapping. You can hear the slap. Use your hearing to detect the slapping. Maintains control of the ball for at least 4 consecutive bounces. So in other words, they have to do it 4 consecutive times. So 1, 2, 3, 4. They may keep going, and then those other ones start coming in. Well, they did it 4 consecutive times. So you get credit. Even though they start slapping after those 4. Yeah. Yeah, good point. And they're not moving their feet. So in other words, I'm bouncing it, and sometimes when they start losing control, they're going to take a step. As soon as they take that step, they get a 0. They've lost control. And they've adapted accordingly to go after it. 0. Two-handed catch. Sorry. This is the type of ball we use with a ball. Some of you use sponge balls. No, those are harder to catch. They hit your hands and bounce off. Use this kind. Ideally, when I tested lots of kids, I have different colors. And I ask them, what color do you want to use? I have a green, and I've got a blue. Michigan State. Which one do you want? I hope they say blue, but I don't care. I did my PhD at Michigan State. Yes.
On the dribbling, can they slap the ball on 4 consecutive dribbles, or is that criteria that are still using it?
As long as they don't lose control, they're slapping 4 times, they didn't lose control, they get a 1. Yeah, remember, it does not have to include all the other performance criteria, but they met the performance criteria that we're looking at. 4 consecutive dribbles. It's not a good one, but they did it successfully, and they did not lose control. Good question. Question for those of you on Facebook, the question was whether or not, if they bounce the ball 4 consecutive times, but every time they're slapping at it, they get a 0 for the one that is for slapping. But for 4 consecutive dribbles, they get credit for it. They didn't lose control. Thank you, Facebook people. Okay, so catch. Again, use different color balls. This is an easy one to toss. It is critical that you toss the ball somewhere between their shoulders and their high thighs, right around their belt. So if you toss the ball and it goes below that, it is not a trial. Do it again. Okay? Now the hands, the first one, hands are in front of the body, elbows are bent, flex. Doesn't say how much flexion, but there has to be some bend. They can't be straight out like this. Okay, there has to be some flexion. Hands must be in the front. A lot of times you'll see kids like this, they're just not prepared to catch the ball until it's almost at them. Then they bring them up. Okay, they get 0 for this one in that case. Secondly, as the ball is being tossed, it's arriving, they're reaching for it. They're extending these bent elbows now to reach for it. They don't have to step. I'd like to see that. I teach them this best. But the test does not have stepping involved. Just that they're extending the arms to reach for it. And then the other easy one, always caught by hands on. Grab the ball by hand, they don't cradle, they don't drop it. These are very easy. Okay, the kick has a challenging performance criteria. A little bit different. Rapid continuous approach to the ball. Okay, I've got to, again, follow the directions for distance. Put the ball down, back the child up to the correct distance. Rapid continuous approach. They're rapidly coming up to it. They cannot stop completely before they offer a kick. It was rapid, but it also was, they came to a stop. A lot of kids, young kids, will run right through it and kick it. Okay? Developmentally, that's where they're at. But rapid continuous approach. Secondly, an elongated stride or leap just prior to kicking. I'm running up here, a good kicker running up. I'm going to stride or leap into the ball. It can't just be the same running pattern. They have to much longer than the running distance. Does that make sense? Okay. The one that I'm more concerned about, not this one, the next one, is this one is the foot. The non-kicking foot is close to the ball. Well, how do you determine if it's close enough to the ball? They don't have to reach for it. If they're having to reach for it, you know it's too far. So did they have to actually reach for it? Has to be, that non-kicking foot has to be near the ball. Either just behind it, just beside it. They do not have to reach for it. They're close enough to it. And the one that I'm a little concerned about, this is a major change from the TGMD3. TGMD3 allow kicking with the toe. We no longer accept that. They kick either with the top of the foot, the shoestrings, or the side of the foot. Now, I recommend strongly that when you demonstrate, you run up and kick it with the side of the foot. The child's going to see that, where they're not going to be able to differentiate whether you kicked it with your toe or on top of your foot. It happens too quickly. So kick it with the side of your foot. Most kids will follow that. Okay? Do you have to? No, you don't have to do it that way. But I tested lots of kids, and I'm always surprised how many kids replicate my kick. They'll run up and they'll kick it with the side of the foot. But they cannot kick it with the toe. I guarantee this is the most unreliable skill on the test. Because you can't tell. It happens so fast whether you kick it with your toe or you just got under it. It happens so quickly that visually you have a hard time differentiating. So it is an unreliable measure. That's why I'm trying to increase your reliability. If you do it with the side of your foot, it's easy to differentiate, even though they may choose to kick it with their toe or whatever. Yes, sir?
You mentioned your preschoolers who run through the ball.
Yeah.
First criteria, do you count that as a rapid continuous approach?
Yes, it's a rapid continuous approach. If they run right through it, it's a rapid continuous approach. They have that one. Yeah. Yep. I mean, obviously, we like to see them.
And then there's some of the other criteria.
Yes. Again, keep in mind, this is not a sports skill. It is a fundamental movement skill that leads to more sport-specific skills. Overhand throw. Okay, I'm going to demonstrate to the child. Child is standing on their poly spot, watching me demonstrate. Watch how hard I throw the ball. Throw the ball hard at the wall. That's part of the directions. Throw it hard. Okay, so now the first thing they should do when I hand them the ball, the first thing they should do is wind up. Now, a question came up yesterday. You've got the benefit of all the questions I've had over the last 2 days. Do they have to be in this position to start? I like to see that, but no, technically, if they're already in this position, they're going to have one of the performance criteria. This side is already oriented to the correct position. I usually stand in front of them and hand it to them, and then step out of the way. So now they usually are facing the wall. First thing they should do, downward arc, not up. Okay? This is immature wind up. This is immature wind up. Downward. It can be very quick, but it has to be coming down. Okay. Wind up is an issue with a downward movement of hand and arm. Steps with the foot opposite the throwing hand. So that's, again, a very easy one to score. They're winding up, they're rotating, they're stepping on the non-preferred hand, the alternating foot, excuse me. Very easy one to score. Rotate hip and shoulder to a point where the non-throwing side faces. If they are in this position, they down, wind up, they're rotating, they're stepping, and now this side is oriented towards where the target was, or where I told them to throw it. It shouldn't end up way up here. They should stay like this. It shouldn't, no. Rotation, even though they don't have a wind up. They may not have a wind up. They've got to have shoulder rotation, step, and throw and follow. Throwing hand follows through after ball release across the body. So this is one of your follow through. Okay? Throw. I'm releasing the ball, and I'm not stopping here. I'm following through across my body. Now the new skill, underhand throw, same ball. On this one, there's a certain distance from the wall that's required. It's not very far, but it's far enough. They must throw the ball hitting the wall. You cannot hit the floor. Okay, we'll get to that performance criteria in a moment. First one, again, preferred hand, comes down behind the body. Okay, so now I'm coming down behind the body, winding up, reaching behind the trunk. Secondly, steps forward with the foot opposite the throwing hand, down, and stepping. Very easy to score. Third, hand follows through after ball release. So I'm tossing the ball, and I'm coming up to at least chest level for me. I'm not just stopping here. A lot of times you'll see kids, and I know especially in adaptive PE, they will do it like this. They'll wind up, they'll step, and then they stop right here. So first of all, they don't hit the wall, you get a 0 for the next one, and secondly, they didn't follow through. And then lastly, is the ball tossed forward and hitting the wall without a balance. Easy to score. Once in a while, you get a child that just barely hits the floor just before it hits the wall. Well, you can see that. Okay? Questions on performance criteria? Yes?
Where's your preferred vantage point for your demonstrations?
Good.
Specifically in throwing skills.
It depends on the skill. Locomotor, you've got to see the whole distance. So I'm going to take a position where the child's running from here to there. I'm going to watch them the whole way.
Sorry, I meant for the demonstrations.
Oh, for the demonstration? Any position that you know they can see it. So in other words, I'm going to position them here on this poly spot, and I'm throwing this direction, that's fine.
So opening up, most likely opening to the student.
Yeah, so that they can see it. Now, that also affords you the opportunity to see whether they're watching you, which doesn't always happen. Okay?
So what's the vantage point for ball skills?
Ball skills, in terms of the demonstration, they should be standing in front of you and watching, or to the side.
When you're scoring?
No, when I'm demonstrating. Okay, now, when you are scoring it, doesn't matter, you can position anywhere in front of the child that you can see it. Does that make sense? And I can be over here watching, I can be here, I can be over here. I don't want to be behind you. I want to be in front to score. Yes, sir.
Opportunity question about when you administer the test, you have to do it in order.
Okay, good question. Is there any specific sequence required in when you administer the test? In which sequence? Do you put the ball skills first, the locomotor skills? Within the locomotor skills, do you do it in as it's listed on the test? No, anyone that works for you. The point I made earlier was I frequently, when I'm working with kids that are very distractible, maybe have some cognitive limitations or ASD, I know they like ball skills better than anything else. So I might say, okay, we're going to do these 2 locomotor skills first, and then I'm going to let you strike the ball. So I'm going to get good behavior out of them for the first 2 locomotor skills, and then I'm going to allow them to strike it. Then we're going to go back and do another 1 or 2 locomotor skills and go to another ball skill. That's fine. That works. Whatever works for you.
When you administer the test, can you break it into 2 days?
You can break it up into any number of days based on your child and the amount of time you have. If it takes you 2 days to do it, 3 days, some teachers will take, okay, I'm going to do today, I'm going to measure 3 of these skills during my class. I'm going to do this, set the standard protocol up, do 3 skills, and then get on with my lessons. And then tomorrow or the next time, I'm going to do 3 more until you get done. No, doesn't matter. Although that's a good research question.
If I'm modeling underhand throw, so I'm modeling once, giving them a practice trial,
Yes.
and I see that they don't understand it yet,
The underhand throw, they don't understand.
or any of them, so then I'm giving them another model, and then I'm trialing.
Yes.
No more practice.
Have to move on. Yes. You've given them an opportunity to
I just model it
understand the
twice.
task. Yes. You modeled it twice, and now it's 2 test drawings. Yes.
How do you demonstrate? You always demonstrate the child preferred input?
Good question. The question for my Facebook group: do you always model based on the child's preferred side? If I know what it is, yes, I do. But I also know that some skills are a little more challenging for us as the administrator to do well with our non-dominant side. Usually it doesn't make a big difference. That's my interpretation. But, for example, the one that I think does is striking. If I know they're left-handed, I'm going to grab the bat correctly for a left-hander, and I'm going to whack it. But most of the skills, I don't think it's going to make a big difference. Now, again, that's a research question. I don't think anybody's asked whether it makes a difference. I'm going to do everything possible as a tester, as a scorer, to get the child's truest score. That's what we're after. Yes, Tony.
Person asked about how long you can give the test. The only thing I would recommend is that you make sure you stay away from their birthday. Because if by the time you finish the test, they're to the next one.
Yes. Question is with how many days it takes to do the testing. Make sure if you go over multiple days, they're not older now with a birthday. Because that, you've got most of the skills done before they turn 6.
You really want to make sure you get a lower score than
Yeah. So you should know what their birthday is on the score sheet. So make sure you don't overlap that when you finish up the test, because they're now older. I can't imagine that happens often, but it can happen for sure. Other questions? Okay, let me see what the time is. We've got about 14 minutes left. I think what I'm going to do is I'd like to address, we could do, you decide. Do you want to practice a couple of the skills administrating the skills? Or do you want me to finish the presentation when I talk to you about using the norms and accessing the correct scores and so forth? We only have 14 minutes left. Okay. Facebook group, you heard the vote. Finish the presentation. I can go either way. Okay, the norms. Here are the states that contributed to the norms. You see any state that has a lot of sites? It's the one you live in. I can't force people to do any testing. Now, I also work with communist China. They can force it. They just get on the phone and say, principal, we're going to be there Friday, we need 60 kids. We show up Friday, and there's 60 kids waiting for them. So there's a positive about that. I'm not sure where I am. But these are where people volunteer. And it's a good representation. Yes, we missed out on some states, but it follows the U.S. Census extremely well. Okay, standard error measurement. I need to spend a moment talking about the standard error measurement. Standard error measurement is a table that's always been in the test manual, but I don't think many of you use it. And so what we've done in the TGMD3 is we put it on your score sheet in the norm table. That is easier to use now. You don't have to do mathematical calculations. But to tell you right now, these are only for the locomotor and ball skill sub-test scores and the total gross motor skill scores. The average amount of error in points for the locomotor skills was 1 point, regardless of how old they were. Now, we round it up or round it down to the nearest whole number. Some may have been 1.1, 1.2, we round it to 1. Okay, so all of these, if we looked at multiple decimal places, they probably would vary a little bit. This tells you, on average, based on all the norms that we collected, that there's, at age 3, or any of the ages on here, on average, there's 1 point of error in the child's observed score. That doesn't mean it could be a positive error or a negative error. But what you end up doing is taking the standard error. If you want to calculate the 68% confidence interval, you use one of these values. Let's say we have a 6-year-old, and he has a score of 24 on locomotor skills. You add 1 point to it and subtract 1 point from 24. Now it's 23 to 25. You are 68% confident that that interval captures their true score. 68% of the time. Use that confidence interval to make your decision. If your cutoff point for eligibility falls within that range, they should be eligible. Most of us use the raw score as though it's a true score. It may be, but likely not. So on the, again, the gross motor total has a higher error to it because there's a lot more, there's 13 skills and a lot more raw score points. But if I'm using that same 6-year-old and I want to know how they did on the total gross motor, and I want to create a 68% confidence interval, I take their total score on raw score, I add 4 points to it, I subtract 4 points to it. A larger range. But I know 68% of the time their true score falls in that range. So use it. Again, remember I think what I told you about the change when I added the skip back in? Those teachers that corralled me behind the barn and wanted that back in because a lot of their ASD kids didn't qualify, they just missed out. I guarantee if they used confidence interval, I bet they would have. They used the raw score. So, but I'm glad they told me. So yeah, this is the front page. Obviously, you have all the information you need there. Converting standard raw scores to age equivalents. Another table that's in the manual makes it very easy for you. Okay, we have a child who happens to, let's go back to that 6-year-old. What is the age of the child on your score sheet? 9? He's 9? Okay, what was his locomotor score? I didn't hear you. 34 for the 9-year-old? Okay. Go down until you find 34. It's right here. Child's 9 years of age, but is functioning like the average 6.6-year-old. That's the age equivalent. His current locomotor performance is equivalent to the average 6-year, 6-month-old child. So if you determine eligibility by age equivalence, how much delay there is, you can use that. That's the way that table's used. Now, ball skills, again, I told you my biggest disappointment on the TGMD3 norms, ball skills, I have to separate boys from girls in the norm table. Because there's still significantly less skill in ball skills on average. So they have to have separate norms. Okay, let's say we had that ball skill score for the 6-year-old. What ball skill score did he have? 24? Okay. Go down until you see 24, right here. Go across, he's functioning like the average 4-year, 6-month-old child. That's his age equivalent in ball skills. So he's really deficient in ball skills. You see how that's used? It makes it very easy for you. Now, I always get the question, and I fall hard for you. Did the publisher create an electronic form? No. Do it. As far as I'm concerned, you can do it. Okay. I can't force them to do it. If they do it for me, they have to do it for all of their tests, and they have lots of tests, and they just aren't willing to spend the money to do it. Okay, so you can create your own electronic form to make it easier for your score sheets and so forth, and your reports. Okay, so that's what I just explained to you. Okay, same, just talking about that. What I'd like to get to, here it is. There is a table in the manual for ball skills, but mostly for ball. This happens to be for ball skills. They've inserted for you to make it easy for you at the 90th percent confidence interval and the 95th percent confidence interval. So it's already on here. You don't have to subtract a certain number of points based on the standard error measurement and add points. It's already there for you. So it should be easier to use the confidence interval to make your decision rather than the raw score. It's easier to use the raw score, of course, but you discount how much error there is on average. And sometimes you're going to make a bad decision or eligibility decision. You don't want to do that. So it's on the table. And this is the way you fill it out. It's already there for you. All the raw scores, the scaled scores, and the confidence interval scores are all there. Now, one of the things I don't like, they didn't share this with me until it was published, is this stuff. They're descriptions. I don't use those. You use what you know. This child, for example, is functioning at less than the first percentile. On ball skills, they say is impaired or delayed. Are you kidding me? He's a lot more delayed than impaired. Don't use those. Those are just examples that they put in for you. Okay? You know that somebody's functioning below the third or fourth percentile, they're really deficient. And so use those kinds of terms. Especially when looking at the age equivalent stuff. You know they're 5 or 6 years behind. Okay. Easy to use the score sheet. Okay, I think that's it. Questions before we end? Hopefully you like the tables. I do as a previous teacher. That's the reason I got into this. It was nothing that I could use that I felt comfortable with many years ago. And so I know teachers in California use this fairly religiously. And so hopefully the changes meet your needs. I listen to you. Yes?
How to get age equivalent
Okay, yeah, let's go back to that table. Let's assume you have a 12-year-old and you test them on ball skills. You have a raw score. The child's 12 years of age, chronologically. His raw score, let's pick one out here, happens to be 13. You look at this table and you look for a score that's, look, right here it is. Right here is the score 13, 14. So this child is functioning like the average 6 and a half to 6'11", 6 years, 6 months to 6 years, 11 months of age. That's the average score that a child gets. So he's performing like an average 6 and a half to 7-year-old boy. Okay, compare that to the chronological age. That's 5 years difference, roughly. Okay? Yeah. But use the 50th percentile growth. Use the 50th percentile rule. Just go across until you find their score. Then go up and you see the age it's equivalent to. Okay? I think I'm done. Thank you.